Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
My name is Gar Demo. I am one of the priests that serves here at St. Thomas, and a friend of mine, Rabbi Jacques Kukerkorn, and I were talking in the afternoon when the horrible event many years ago happened, and felt a nudging to gather people for prayer, thinking we might have a few people from St. Thomas and a few people from Temple Israel who were sharing our space at the time. We called a few friends, and we thought we'd have a simple prayer vigil that then opened a pathway to the world for Mindy to speak in an incredibly powerful way that night. And so we return tonight to be together here again, as Mindy has already begun her book launch, and it's so good to see you here and to have you back.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to start us with prayer and then hand this over to Kelly and Mindy. So the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let's pray. God, we give thanks to you for William, Reet, and Terry, for their lives among us and for the gift that they gave to all of us in their joy and in their living. We gather as we continue in our own journey in grief, but also as we continue our journey in life and in love and in light in the world. As we gather this night to listen and to be inspired and to hear love, we ask that you would be with us, guide us, and help us to reach out to others, to include them, to inspire them, and to make the world a better place. We give thanks to you for Mindy and her ministry to the world. Please continue to use her as a vehicle for your love and your mission to bring more people into the light and into love. This we ask in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
So I'm going to introduce you to Kelly Demo, who is also one of the priests here, and she will share with you. We happen to be married.
Wait, what? Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to do a little introduction. This is a piece that Gar actually wrote when he read the book, and it's sort of a response from the heart about the book. And so I'm going to read what he wrote. There's an Irish saying that goes something like, "It is in the shelter of each other that people live." There's a tragic beauty and hope that comes from the shelter so many gave each other after the shootings and death of Reet, William, and Terry. I think the stories and weaving together of the past and present, as told in Healing a Shattered Soul, lets the reader witness the leavening of hope from Mindy's grief and faith. There's a danger in our modern society of being a spectator in life. That is, we simply take in the events we see in the world around us and often do not see how we are able to impact and change the world. We see violence and hate in small and large acts, and we do nothing to stop them because they seem far off and distant. We can watch any newscast and see unfathomable tragedy happen and then move on as if nothing has happened. In this book, we are brought on the real and raw journey to see how hate and evil lead to violence and destruction. Through Mindy's intimate retelling of the lives that were changed on that tragic day, we feel the shelter they provided to so many. It is in the shadow of that story that our souls are stirred to do something. That is why this book is so important. Drawing from Mindy's faith and hope in the midst of her tragic loss, she didn't let the darkness destroy her. Instead, she allowed God to move through her by listening to that still, small voice, and she's been led to change the world. This book is not just about that day. It is also about the power of community and relationships, which acts as a balm on the wounds of life. The world is in desperate need of healing shelter, without which we cannot turn the tides of hate and destruction. When you let this book marinate your soul, it will change you. You will be inspired and stirred to action. You can no longer be a spectator. Instead, you are called and empowered to build shelter that others might live. Please help me welcome Mindy Corporon.
Thanks, Kelly. Thank you. Yes? Oh. Okay.
We're good.
Raise your hand if you were here the night of the vigil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 13. Okay. So if you have not read the book, that's interesting. There were 13 of you. Did you hear that message? There were 13 of you. Wow, I just caught it. I'm like, oh, I just said 13. Tara, raise your hand again. Why don't you stand up, Tara? This is Tara from the vigil. I won't make you come hold my hand the whole time. I will if you want me. I know you would. Okay. So we talked. I have just a piece that I'm going to read, and then Kelly's got questions, and then we'll just do an open question and answer. Oh, that's where I'm ending. I'm like, that doesn't look right. It's because where I'm ending. Okay, that's why it didn't look right. I'm starting on page 148, and I'm in the chapter Keep Listening. Every movement I make is thoughtful and carefully considered, as this is the first time. I'm tying shoes without reliving. Standing in their 2-person walk-in closet, I see sweatshirts hanging for me to take. Without regard for size, I grabbed my father's University of Oklahoma sweatshirt. Each time I enter the living room or dining area, new people have arrived. The people are changing, but their faces are the same. Grief-stricken. Hugs and more hugs. I am so sorry is repeated over and over. I'm saying it to myself and then hear it repeated by each friend. I am so sorry. It dawns on me that the language we have is not sufficient to express the deep pain we are all experiencing. People are scattered throughout the house. The conversations are in normal tones. I remember hearing the question, why, multiple times. We don't yet know the facts about what happened, and we have no way of understanding the why behind this horrendous act of violence. Will we ever understand why? What makes someone want to murder? A grandfather and his grandson, my father and son. Why? Remnants of the lingering storm hold a chill in the air. The cold stings the warmth of love I had felt right out of me. And for a moment, the chill holds me tightly, as if to say, you needed an escape from the sadness in there. The inconceivable events of the day are weighing heavily on me. Walking away from my parents' home and the despair it now held brought me a moment of relief. As I sit down in the front seat of Jerry and Josh's van, I feel grateful for their friendship. Their son Dawson is a good friend of Reed's, and we have experienced many Boy Scout adventures together. Scouting weekends were a meaningful part of my role in Reed's life. Together, we traversed the woods, rivers, the plains, and snow. There was always a lot of snow. We have frightening memories of taking shelter from a tornado in a bunker, and we found some comedy in one of the women's lollies, also known as a latrine. Most of our overnights included Josh and Dawson. Josh still teases me about my camping style. I carried my summer camp gear in giant plastic containers. It is well known that rain followed our Cub Scout and then Boy Scout troop to every campsite. I don't mind getting wet, but I want my stuff to stay dry. Josh finds it hilarious and loves to poke fun at me. Jerry and I have been in a mom's group together for many years. We started meeting monthly when our boys were in 6th grade. We discussed our kids' lives while drinking wine in hopes of keeping a pulse on how they are doing and what shenanigans might be at hand. Similar to a few other friends of ours, we also have younger children of similar age. Lucas, belonging to us, and Emma to the Gardners were born 2 days apart. A stream of consciousness is flowing from my mouth into the dark van. Jerry and Josh receive a moment-by-moment account of my morning with Reet and Dad. I keep reliving my dreadful experience from a few short hours ago. It feels as if this morning belongs to someone else, except that I keep reliving it over and over. I keep thinking about the words Reet spoke to me this morning and the words I said to him. I replay the conversation with my dad, which I now realize was to be our final conversation. I never imagined that to be the case. I see myself waking Reet up that morning, how we laughed and how he warned me to steer clear of his drool. Classic Reet. He gave me a warm and loving hug like he always did. It now registers as our final hug and will be remembered as one of my most memorable from him. Reet was my awesome hugger of the family. He would come from anywhere to find me for a hug. He loved to drape himself on me as if we were one. We were so close. After pausing to remember to breathe, I hear myself asking Jerry and Josh where the vigil is being held. I haven't been paying attention to where we are driving, and I don't recognize the area. Josh tells me that it is being held at St. Thomas the Apostle Episcopal Church. Why, Josh? Why is this Episcopal Church holding the vigil? When I heard that this was a student vigil only a short while ago, I had envisioned a gymnasium opening for the students. Josh says, I don't know, darling. I'm sorry, I don't know. The darkness of the van and their care for me prompts me to repeat my morning again. I continue to relive the day aloud with Jerry and Josh. Repeating the events of the day is a desperate attempt to wrap my head and heart around it. It feels as if repeating the day over and over might keep Dad and Reet alive. Reliving the story allows me to stay in the moment with the people that I love. That feeling, much more comforting than the reality of the story I am living this evening without them. I want the day back. I want 1 minute back to warn them and to do anything to stop this harrowing tragedy, which will shift the trajectory of our lives forever. In a childlike voice that doesn't sound like me, I ask Josh and Jerry again why the vigil is at St. Thomas the Apostle. Again, Josh says he doesn't know and apologizes for his lack of information. They extend grace as I rattle off more questions. Who belongs to this church that would host a vigil? Why would this church host the vigil? Wouldn't a school host the student vigil? They respond calmly with compassion to my irrational questioning. As we pull into the parking lot, the answer to why this vigil is being held at St. Thomas the Apostle Episcopal Church washes through me. Speaking like a child waking from a dreamlike state, as if being told a secret or reminded of a memory from years ago, I hear myself say out loud, I know why it's at St. Thomas the Apostle. Without hesitation, I continue, because Reet was baptized in an Episcopal church in Duncan, Oklahoma when he was a baby. I can feel God. His presence is palpable. I feel him speaking to me, and I wonder to myself, can it be that God is actually communicating with me? Or has the trauma from today made me crazy? My heart is all over the place. I am grappling with intense pain and deep sadness, but it feels balanced with comfort and peace. I oscillate back and forth. I'm wondering now with more confidence where God will lead me if I will listen. And Jerry is with us, of Josh and Jerry. You want to raise your hand? Jerry was in the car with me, and I confirmed that that was the same thing that they remembered. So that was what I was going to read, and now Kelly's going to ask me questions. And this is not my own book, so this one is available, and I did not dog-ear it at all.
The books are available for sale afterwards. There's a hardback edition as well as a paperback, and then I'm sure you saw the T-shirts as you came in as well. We can take a cash check or credit card. You alluded to the goings-on of the day. You replayed the goings-on of the day many times. It sounds like it was a mom day. The kids had places to go, and you had to sort of divide and conquer. And then tell us a little bit about that day and the decisions you made about who went where, and then what happened and the voice that you heard.
Okay. Well, the decision about who went where, that conversation started on April 12th. So we were at my home on April 12th for dinner. My mom and dad came over, and was there with my husband, Lynn, and Reet and Lucas, and we were around the round table for dinner. And I wanted to take Reet to his audition, and I said I was going to take Reet to his audition, and Reet's face let me know that I should not go to his audition, that I should instead be taking Lucas or going with Lucas to the lacrosse game. And selfishly, I had arranged for the audition. I knew it was the third audition of the spring, and I had been waiting on that audition as long as he had, and I wanted to be the one to drive him. But Reet said, "Mom, you should go to Lucas's lacrosse game," because the week before that, I had missed some lacrosse games because we were out of town. So all these things happened. And so we said to my mom, Yay, can you drive Reet to his audition? She would always be the next person to ask. But she was busy with Andrew and Katie, my niece and nephew. They were going to take Easter Bunny pictures. And so the next person was my dad. And my dad said yes, he would drive him. So that's how he was chosen. He was chosen because of circumstances, just, who's going where and what we're doing, just decisions, just normal life decisions that you make about things. And then the morning of and the day of, Reet and Lucas were both in the house on their own, doing their own things. Lucas was preparing to go to the lacrosse game, wanted to go earlier than he needed to. And Lynn was happy to take him a little bit earlier than he needed to go. We were putting a pool in the backyard, and so we'd spent some time looking at pool furniture. We had that conversation with Reet, and Reet helped us with the pool furniture. That's interesting. He picked khaki. And then my dad showed up. Reet sang to me. Reet sang both songs to me. So he sang On the Street Where You'll Live, and then he sang You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone. And I didn't record them, and I didn't take a picture. I've processed that now. But he sang to me in the kitchen, and it was just the two of us. And then my dad showed up. We had a little bit of chit-chat back and forth. We went outside, talked about what the plans were, that he was going to take Reet, he was going to bring Reet back, then we would all meet at church, and then we would meet for dinner because my brother Tony's birthday was the next day. So my brother Tony he's an April 14th birthday. And when I got to the lacrosse game and it was canceled, you just couldn't, I don't know if you remember the day, you probably do, many people do remember the day. It was really beautiful in the morning and cool, but it was comfortable and really beautiful, and then the storms came. But when I was at the lacrosse game and they said it was canceled, there was no storm. had no idea why they were canceling the game, but they said there was lightning in the area, but we couldn't see any lightning anywhere. And they canceled the lacrosse game, because you think about all these little pieces. If the lacrosse game had not been canceled, I would have stayed at the lacrosse game. But instead, I got in my car, and I was pulling into the Jewish Community Center at 1:08. And I know exactly when I was pulling in because I looked at the clock, and it said 1:08. And I thought, I'm going to be there before they might not even be here yet. His audition was at 1:30. And so I knew I was going to be there in time for his audition. And after I saw the truck, and then I saw my dad's body, and then I, was panicking and upset and concerned, and I was driving faster than I should. I barely made it out of the car. I left my purse in the car. I left my phone. Well, my phone was in the truck with my dad. I left my purse in the car. Just grabbed the keys and ran. And I didn't park straight. And I remember someone telling me later that I was very concerned about how I parked. I didn't write about that, but I remember someone saying, you were really concerned. I parked kind of like random across the lines, and I just ran to him not knowing what was wrong, not knowing at the moment that he was already deceased until I got up to him. And then when I ran up to him very close, about 2 feet away, and I could tell physically that he was deceased, and that's when I felt someone stop me. And when I've talked about it publicly, I've never explained it as clearly as I tried to explain it in the book. So for a reader, I try to explain exactly what it felt like, that someone put their hands on my shoulders and stopped me. It was just this blunt. And when my Aunt Dina read that specific piece, she called me and said, that was your guardian angel. She said, your guardian angel stepped in and stopped you. I said, okay, that's fine. I know I was stopped. And I wanted to go to Dad, but I knew there was nothing I could do. And so I'm standing there stopped, and that's right when I heard the words, your Father's in heaven, go find Reet. And then I should have walked around my dad on the left. There was nothing, there was no one, there was nothing on the left, but instead I walked around the right. I walked around the back of the truck, and that's when I found Reet in the arms of the 2 men. So that's how that happened. It was very powerful. I mean, that's just always stayed with me, is how that felt.
To have God's presence so
yes.
palpable.
Well, and I didn't know that it was God at the time.
At the time.
I was very concerned about why I was hearing voices.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was very concerned.
I can imagine.
Yes.
You write that you held on to some guilt for a long time because you were the one that set that date of the audition.
And that I didn't drive him.
And that you didn't drive him. Can you talk about that and how you worked through that?
Well, I still feel guilt.
Yeah.
I do. I still feel it. But I also think about it that if I'd driven him and if I had died, if I had not parked in a different place, and I mean, my dad was licensed to carry guns, and he had 2 guns in the car with him. He was licensed, and he didn't have a chance to defend himself, so I would not have had any chance to defend myself either. I don't know if I would have parked in the same place. I go over it. I don't go over it and over it all the time, but since you asked. But I do, I think what would have happened if I had died, if I had driven and I had died, then Lucas would have been without, his mom and his brother. And it was so difficult for him for, early on, and he's much better now. But then that, I've talked about that with my mom and with my husband, and so I still work through it. But I also know that, every little step had its own piece for a reason, somehow, and that's where I was, and I don't think that God wanted them dead. I don't at all think that God wanted them dead, but I know that I feel very confident that God knew what was going to happen, and when it happened and I was there, he was there so fast. He was there with me, and I felt that. But it took me a while to feel confident in saying that I thought that that was God, even after I told Pastor Hamilton that that's what I heard, I still thought, I think he thinks I'm crazy. And I probably shouldn't tell people that. I should keep that to myself, that I heard the voices. So I did keep all of that to myself for a while.
The events of the day obviously affected a wide circle of people. One of them was the medic, and
Thomas Bates.
yes, can you talk a little bit about Thomas and his role in what happened?
Yes, so I found Thomas Bates because he found me. So he messaged me one time on Messenger and said, I think he must have heard me speaking, and I said, I don't know who the two men are that were holding Reet.
Yeah.
I knew Mickey Blount. I had met Mickey, and Mickey had told me his name, and I had Mickey's card. So I had that connection. But Thomas had reached out to me, and I had reached back out to him. And then since we've talked several times, and I've interviewed him, he didn't have children at the time. He had a girlfriend, but he didn't have children. And Reet changed him, but he didn't understand to what extent until he had children. And the second time he reached out to me was after he had children. And he called and said, I'm so sorry that I didn't let you come to your son. And he said, I didn't know any different. I didn't know a parent's love. I didn't understand a parent's love at the time, but I do now. And I said, I understand. I've forgiven you. I was never mad at them. I was never mad at Mickey Blount. I was never mad at them. And I think it's because I was a physician's daughter, and I knew what physicians and people caring, I knew what they needed to do. And I was probably hysterical, and they probably did not need me hysterically doing whatever, you know. So when Thomas and I interviewed again this last summer was when we had the conversation about compassion, and that he's become much more compassionate, that he realized that his military training helped him save people's lives, but that the compassion that he felt from Reet and from that whole incident and from me really helps him piece people back together in a different way, in an emotional way, rather than just a physical way. So, and we exchanged holiday cards and Facebook posts, and he's got 2 children now.
Nice. Part of the circle of people that this affected is the St. Thomas community, because you were so brave to come forward. Can we go back to that night?
Yes.
of the vigil? You realized that the Episcopal Church connection, which is so beautiful, and then you write about how you came in, and it was sort of a sea of faces, and
Right.
you were
I
holding on tight
recognized
to some friends.
I recognized a lot of people. I didn't know I would recognize anyone. I was so overwhelmed with how many people were here. I was so overwhelmed, and I remember thinking, "Oh, Mom and Lynn would be so happy to see these people here. They would be." And I thought, Reet would love that all these people are here. Dad would love that all these people are here. I just kept thinking that. And I don't remember who was speaking. I don't remember who came up. That was all very fuzzy and blurry. But whatever it is they were saying wasn't touching me. It wasn't like I was in such a place that nobody would be able to. But I didn't understand that at the time. The grief is so deep that it's hard to get down to that level. And so I remember looking at Tara and saying, I'm supposed to speak. And she said, are you sure? But she believed me. And I was still like, oh, now what? You know, I mean, I think we can be in a position where we trust what God tells us to do or asks us to do, and we can say, okay, I feel really confident in that until we take a step. And when I stood up to take a step, I was like, oh, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And so, but the comfort of knowing, I just knew that since it was at the Episcopal Church, it was like he washed through me and said, I've got this, you're fine. God was like, I've got this, you're fine. And I was like, okay. And so, but I still wavered, every time I had to take a step to do something, I still wavered. And I had to say to myself, it's good, it's going to be fine.
And you gave such a gift to everyone there that night, to move beyond the hate and not allow ourselves to get wrapped up in that. You also write about how when you were younger, you lost a friend, and the pastor's response sort of was not helpful. Is that part of what called you to? Because
yes,
a lot of his teenage friends were here. And
yes,
there was a message or something.
Yes. So when I was in high school, my friend Kyle was killed in a car accident, and that was the first death I had experienced of a friend, and it was horrible. It was very close to the family. I was like their daughter, and he was like a brother, and it was just really horrible. And I remember being so angry that the sun came up and that the world continued, because my world was so dark. The world should not continue. And so when I was in the living room at my mom's home, my mom and dad's home, and I heard them say a student vigil. So that's how I heard it was a student vigil. I heard the word student vigil, and all of a sudden I felt like a 16-year-old again, in so much pain. And I thought, I need to let them know that to not be debilitated. So my purpose for coming here to the vigil, wherever the vigil was going to be, my purpose for coming to the vigil and arriving at the vigil was to talk directly to the students. That was my goal. And I didn't know what I was going to say to them. I didn't know I was going to talk publicly, but I wanted to speak to the students. And then on the Tuesday after the murder, because the kids weren't in school on Monday, they were out of school. So on Tuesday, we went to the school, and I did speak to the students then. And I told them just kind of a longer rendition of that this was very, very painful. This was going to hurt. It was going to be difficult, but that they would be able to find joy again. And I wanted them to not allow this to derail their whole lives. And Kyle's death didn't derail my whole life, but Kyle's death is so important. It was such an important piece, that I wrote about it as a 52-year-old. And so yeah, that we just don't know sometimes how impressionable teenagers and children are, or how we are. Until something triggers in us, and we go back and think of ourselves as that teenager. And I thought of Kyle when I was in the living room, and I just knew I needed to be here to tell students anything I could to help them, get on that bridge to healing. I didn't understand it myself. I did not know. I had no idea how hard it would be for us. I had no idea. But I wanted to help them at the time.
You also write about pain in your heart, the heartbreak, but manifesting itself physically. What does that feel like for you?
You can't breathe. You literally cannot breathe. You lose your breath. So imagine being underwater for longer than you want to be. And then coming up and getting some air, and then being underwater again. And then coming up and getting air and being underwater again. It's like that. And physically, your body hurts. Physically, you ache. And it's dark. All of a sudden, it's just very, very dark. To me, it's very dark. Like my brain is dark. Everything is dark. Things around me go dark. It's very dark. It's a physical sensation. And when shootings happen now, and I hear about them, that same feeling comes back. It's not as heavy, but when Srinivas Kuchibola was murdered, it was almost that heavy because it was in Olathe. So when it's something really close to home, it's debilitating. It makes me tired. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you've had COVID. I'm not going to do that, but I know that COVID makes people very tired. And I know that, when you're sick, you're just very tired. It's just like that. You just feel like you're in molasses and you just can't function. So it's physical. So when people who have not grieved a significant trauma, significant loss for a long, long period of time, it's hard to understand why someone else is. And it could be, everyone's loss is their own. And I tell people that. I don't want people to compare their loss to mine. Because someone who's, 18 years old and their best friend was their cat or their dog and they lose that pet, they could feel the same level of pain that I'm feeling because that's their level. That's their level of pain. And so I want people to not compare it. I want people to understand and have their own grief and realize that they have permission to have their own grief. I try to tell people that you have your permission to have and to grieve your own way. But for those who haven't, you're very lucky if you've never had any grief at all. If you've never had any grief at all, you're very lucky. And try to understand that those of us who have had grief, that it can last a long time, and it can come and go, and it can come and go. And it's a journey, it's a process. It's not linear.
I think as a society, we are grappling with a sort of community grief now with this pandemic.
Collective grieving.
Collective, global grief that people are attuned to at different levels. People have been affected at different levels, but certainly it is a strange sort of, collective sort of PTSD. What do we do with that? What wisdom can you share with us from your journey?
I think it's very good for people to acknowledge it. First, you have to acknowledge it and acknowledge that when you wake up that you're sad, and then own it and say, you know what, I'm sad today. It might be kind of a crappy day. What can I do today for it not to be so bad? And so for me, I might go have sweet tea. Or I might go seek out someone that has rhubarb pie because I don't make it. So I'll go find rhubarb pie or sweet tea because those are things that Reet liked. So I'll do something on purpose to seek out something that makes me feel good, that brings me joy. I'll go for a walk. I'll go outside, the sun, go for a walk out in the sunshine, the wind. Even if just a walk in the frigid cold, but you're all bundled up is helpful, just fresh air. But collective grieving, so in April of last year, so every April when the anniversary comes, it's very difficult. So the whole week of April before the 13th is very difficult. The 13th is difficult. And then I get better until May 1st. And then May 1st is very hard because May is full of difficult days. My husband's birthday is May 2nd. Mother's Day comes. Reed's birthday is May 21. Their graduations. It's just May is just filled with all kinds of difficult dates for me. So what I did about that last April, which was really interesting about COVID, because everyone in the entire world had their world stopped. Everyone had to change. Everyone had something taken away from them. Even if it was, you just couldn't go to your office, but you could do everything else or whatever. But we all had a lot of significant changes in our life, and you had no control over it. And that is what it's like on a small scale of losing someone so rapidly and having them just yanked out of your life. And that's what happened. They were yanked out of our life. They were there, and then they were not. And that's a trauma. Just like when COVID happened, remember the weekend that everything shut down? And we kind of knew COVID was happening, and we'd heard about it, and it was happening, and then all of a sudden, everything stopped. And that's what it's like on a different scale, on a different level. But I was having my own grief, and then I actually felt a little comforted that everyone had some knowledge now of what it felt like, even though we were grieving something different. So, but what to do about it? I think acknowledging it is key. Acknowledging it yourself and saying it maybe out loud to whoever's with you, whoever you're talking to, whoever you're in communication with, let them know. Let them know how you feel. Let them know how you don't feel. Let them know if you are snappy, why you might be snappy. And I want to say, so many people will say, and it's true, there are many, many different ways to grieve and many different ways to try to find healing. But there are unhealthy ways to heal. And I talk about that. I talk about that in the book. So be cognizant that when you're working through healing, that you're not doing it in any way that's harming yourself or harming anyone else. Find ways that are healthy for you to heal.
I have one last question, and then I would like to open it up to anyone here. To add to your May dates, we now have a new date, May 3rd, which is when your book drops, which is pretty awesome. However, that is also when the man who crashed the world.
I know. He died on May 3rd.
In prison.
Yes.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Actually, pretty good.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Mm-hmm. Mom called me back. We had just talked for about 45 minutes. I'd done a live interview with Pastor Adam Hamilton, and then we'd gone to dinner, and then she and I were chatting about some things, and she called me back, and I thought that she was, butt dialing me. I thought, oh, she doesn't mean to be calling me back, so I answered. I just thought, she just put the phone somewhere and hid it because she called me right back. And I answered. I said, Mom, and she said, he died. And I knew exactly who she was talking about. I said, you're kidding. Actually, I said an explicitive, but it's so powerful. I get messages every day in some fashion. I get messages from heaven, whether they're from my dad or from Reet or from God. It's all fine. But I get messages. I'm very, very aware of transcendence, spirituality, different realms. And it started I'll go back to this, it started right after they were murdered, and I was at home, and people would be talking to me, and I know they thought I was present. I know you thought I was present, but I was kind of not. I was in this other world, and it was so peaceful, this other world, and I really liked it. I really liked being in that other world, and I can find that when I journal. I can find that when I write, and so it's really comforting to write. So when Mom called and told me that he died, and we conferred that it looked as if he died of natural causes, we talked about that. I said today was the book's birthday, and he died. And we just kind of were repeating it over and over. And then I called Lucas. My mom called my brothers, and I called Lucas and said, and he was busy working on an essay because he just finished his freshman year at Arkansas. So he was working on his final essay. And I said, the murderer who murdered Dad and Reet died. And then I could hear him pause, and he said, turn down the music to whoever was in the room, because I had music on, and they turned down the music. And he said, what did you say? And I told him again. And he said, there is a God. I said, yes, there is. So, yeah. So I am happy with it. I am fine with it. I'm not like overjoyed, but I'm fine with it. I'm very thankful that we don't have to worry about the appeal.
Yeah.
I'm just very thankful that there's no more news about him.
Yeah.
And I managed to write an entire book without saying his name. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that you didn't either. I knew you weren't going to, but some people do still. They want to mention his name. And I'm like, you don't really have to. You don't have to say his name. So
I'd love to take a question or two from you all, if you have one. We don't have a roaming microphone, so just speak up and I'll repeat it so the people online can hear as well. Questions from you all? Yeah, Bill.
Mindy, you have changed a lot of lives since your life was shattered. I'm just wondering, as you think about all the good things that have come out of this, what is the thing that you
Thank you. So the question was, she has obviously changed a lot of lives in the work that she has done, and he was asking, what does she feel the best about the work that you've done? You might even want to talk about Faith Always Wins and all of these amazing things that you have done.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, so we created Faith Always Wins. You think I've changed a lot of lives?
Yes,
Okay.
I think we can vouch for that, yeah.
Okay, it was like, okay.
That's safe. We can say
So
that.
Faith Always Wins is the foundation. We created that. I'm trying to think of, and then Faith Always Wins created 7 days, Make a Ripple, Change the World. I can't hear you. Thank you, Jennifer. Workplace healing. We're creating workplace healing. So the question is, what do I think is the best? You know, when you were asking the question, and I don't think that it really answers exactly what you were asking, but when you started asking the question and I was thinking ahead, like, what am I going to answer? The most important thing that came to mind that I did was I learned that I needed to live for Lucas and not Reet. So when you were asking the question, that's what I was thinking I was going to answer, but that's really not what you asked. But I learned that people die and we have a reality. And we don't like it, but we have a reality. And I speak to that reality a lot. But I had to realize that reality. So, and it was really hard because Reet was my person. And now Lucas is my person, and he knows that. But I think of all the things that I've done, the most meaningful to other people is helping Christians, probably helping Christians more than any other faith, understand and be comfortable around Muslims. Not also Jews, but mostly Muslims. I think that so many people don't have any interaction with Muslims. And I would say if I had to look back and think, what am I the most proud of that I've done, is I have put people of different faiths in a room together and had them learn from one another. That's what I would say.
That was driven because of the crazy motivation
Yes.
of the murderer.
He thought that he was going to murder Jews, and it doesn't matter that he murdered Christians. He shouldn't have murdered anyone.
Right.
But he thought he was going to murder Jews and went to 2 Jewish locations. And so, you know, I had my own journey of learning about Judaism and my own journey about learning about Islam. And now I'm friends with Sunaina Dumala, and I, learned more about Hinduism. And 7 Days did a big event about Hinduism this year. So I've learned all of that, but I'm most proud of bringing people together. But it's really, I think, Christians and Muslims, because I think that Christianity and Judaism is a little bit more closely related. Asher, how's this? Asher?
So what are some things you can say about like students and how they always are like in threat of guns and like is there anything you can say to that?
So the question was what she could say to students who live at school under the threat of violence all the time, and all of the drills that you have to do, and all of that is the question.
Yeah, I would say that sucks, that you have to do that. And that I think that your generation, but older than you, are going to make a difference so that their children don't have to do that. And the anxiety that students must have is horrible. I mean, just think about the anxiety that someone's going to have. I remember the tornado, when we had to go shelter for tornadoes, and that was anxiety driven. But to think that a human might come in and take lives is frightening. I would say, if you see something, say something. I would absolutely say that. If you see something, say something. And when you see someone who is never around anyone else, be the person to go join them. And that's why you have on an others shirt. So I brought the others shirts today. So our themes of 7 days are love, discover, others, connect, you, go, and onward. And I specifically brought the others shirt because more often than not, people that are so violent against others are already hurt. They are hurt people. And how did they get hurt? You know, we don't know. We don't always know at all why they got hurt. But a lot of it is when they're teenagers and they're lonely. And they're lonely. They're loners. You know, who's that loner in the corner? Well, they're strange. I don't want to talk to them. Or, you know, or she does this or he does that, and I don't want to talk to them. And it is difficult. But that's what I would say to teenagers is when you're in that environment, you know, maybe not by yourself walk over to them if that makes you uncomfortable, but get a buddy and go to that person that is alone and lonely and find out, you know, what you can do to help them. I mean, it's not like you all of a sudden have to ask them over for an overnight, but just to say hello, you know, just to engage them in a conversation and find out what their experience is. I remember when Reet was in second grade, he was 7 years old, he was second grade, and this little boy kept bothering him. This little boy in line just kept bothering him, and Reet would tell me about it. And he'd say, so-and-so kept poking me, kept doing this, and it wasn't bullying, but I said, have you turned around and asked him what he had for breakfast? He said, why would I do that? I said, just engage. I was trying to get him to engage him in conversation and see why he kept poking him. And Reet turned around one day and he said, well, he came and told me, he said, Mom, I asked him, he poked me, and I turned around and said, what did you have for breakfast? And the little boy said, I don't get breakfast. He was the oldest of 7, Reet found out. And he didn't get breakfast. And Reet went and got him food at school, found him food. The boy never poked him again. But sometimes so Asher, for you, you know, for students, some of the people that want to hurt students, that want to hurt, are hurting. And when you think that you might see someone that's lonely, then go say something to them. Anything. What did you have for breakfast? What are you doing for lunch? You know, because finding out other people's experiences creates that human contact that we need.
A lot of the work you do is with young people.
Yes.
The 7 days, that's my passion, and so
Yes.
I love it. I get really excited.
I
to
loved
see
when
the
you
work that
showed up
do.
with the youth group.
We
So
did.
Kelly
We
showed up
did.
with the youth group one time to one of our interfaith activities, and she said the youth group showed up and they loaded them on the bus and they came to the interfaith activity, and it was awesome.
They still talk about that.
Yes, so we now have a Kindness Youth Leadership Team. And they're all high school students, freshman through senior, and they are put in charge of 7 days, Make a Ripple, Change the World. They are partnered with an adult, and the adult mentors them. But these students are learning skills, how to interview, how to write, requests, how to call adults and ask them questions, how to set up an event, how to order food for any kind of activity. They're learning skills. Sometimes they're in photography, they're in PR, social media, whatever it is they're kind of interested in, we try to pair them with an adult. And so, 25 high school students helped plan 7 days this year, and we're really intimately involved.
Mm-hmm. They did a beautiful job with it, yeah. Other questions from the audience? Yeah, Laura.
You mentioned, rightly so, that everybody grieves differently. And I think one of the places where that's the most obvious is between spouses who lost a child. Did you experience difficulty, or do you have any strategies for working through that when you're trying to walk this path together but in a different way?
So do I have any strategies for spouses that are grieving? Is that the question? You want to say it? Was that?
Yeah, that's what.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Let me think on that. Again, well, here's what I would do. I would schedule meetings. And talk about anything that you can talk about. So Lucas didn't want me to say Reed's name. for almost 2 years. It was really hard for me to not say Reed's name around Lucas, but I tried not to for a while. So it wasn't just spouse, it was people in the household. Len went out with friends who came in to get him and took him for wine. Len wanted to escape, and I noticed very early on that if Lucas was not in the house, Len didn't want to be in the house. So if Lucas was gone, Len wanted to leave, so I was alone. So what I would say is have some conversations, have some meetings about how you're grieving and how you see them grieving. You know, I don't know who's going to start the conversation, but have conversations about how you're grieving. You know, it was very helpful to me because Roger Kemp, who lost his daughter Allie Kemp to a violent murder in 2009, he came to my office and talked to me, and he said, you're going to hear that 50% of marriages fail after they lose a child. And we had to fight really hard to not get divorced. Like, we talked about it, we thought about it, but we tried to, and we are still together and happily together. But it is hard, so I understand why. Because I think, and this is not to be light at all, but I think that the shared pain is so much. You know, you kind of have to let one of you have the pain and then let the other one have the pain, unless you have a circle of people around you who will help share the pain. And that's what we had. So we had a circle of people who helped take the pain off of us for a period of time. And that was really helpful. I don't think that a couple can go it alone. I remember when Dom DeChico walked in our house one time, and I think Lucas was up in his room, and Lynn was probably in his office or somewhere, and I was in it. We were all three. It's in other rooms. And Dom walked in, and he's like, you're not even together. You're not even in the same room. And so we had to schedule time to be in the same room. We also learned the hard way. We were not ready to handle April 13th anniversary, just the three of us, until last year when we were forced to handle it because of COVID. But one of the years in Kansas City did not go well. We just didn't have anything planned. I wanted to do something. They didn't want to do anything. And so it's just better to talk about it. And it's also good to allow them, the other person besides you, to do what they need to do. So I came back this year for April 13th. I needed to be here April 13th. And my husband, Lynn, didn't want to be here. Like, he wanted to not be here as much as I wanted to be here. And I had to be okay with that. And I think that's important too. But you have to talk about it or you don't know. And try not to take it as a personal, as anything personal to you. You've got to think about and get them to try to talk about it. But Lynn talks about it so much less than I do. So it was kind of hard. I was the one figuring it out. I was the one who figured it out. Lucas wanted us to watch every Will Ferrell movie ever made. We had to watch every funny movie because he wanted to hear his dad laugh. And I didn't want to watch all those movies, but I did it because Lucas needed that for healing. Lynn needed to be, if Lucas wasn't in the house, Lynn wanted out of the house. And so if I was going to be with him, I needed to go with him, or I would be alone at the house too. So, you know, pay attention and maybe have some, you know, family meetings, couple meetings, and talk about it. And then be okay with how they need to grieve. Because sometimes I grieve by myself because Lynn doesn't want to grieve like I do. But he also would just, you know, when I would just cry and sob, he would just hold me, which was helpful. So that was my grieving, and he would allow that to happen. And then when he does his kind of grieving, he'll get snippy, and I'll say, "Are you sad?" And he'll say, "Yes." I'm like, okay. He comes at it differently, and I didn't understand it. It took time to understand it.
You talk about a circle of people who took on your grief and
Yes.
helped you. And there were people who took 2-hour shifts,
Yes.
right?
Many people
Yeah.
took 2-hour shifts. Yes, 2 of them are here. 3 of them are here, maybe. Well, somebody else might be here. More people might be here. Yes, they took on 2-hour shifts, 10 days. 10 days.
Just
People
be
came in.
present and
Oh, they weren't just present. They they cleaned the floor. They did the dishes. They took Lucas to school. They picked Lucas up from school. They fed our dog. They walked our dog. They did our laundry. They bought groceries. They made sure that we ate. I say they breathed life into the house. So it's really pretty simple. Whatever you do in your household, when you have a grief event like that, you just can't do it. And so people just need to come in. But what you have to do as a griever is you have to say yes. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to say yes. When someone says, I want to help you, just say yes and let them help you, because it's going to help them too. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is they're taking some of the grief off of you. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many times I went to Jerry and Josh's house before they would leave for work, and they would never complain. And I would show up at their house crying, and they would let me cry. And then we'd end up talking about scout trips, and then we'd end up laughing. And then I'd say, okay, I'm okay again. But they would take some of that grief from me, and that would help. It would help process it. Yeah.
a gift. Other questions? Yeah.
Yes.
Lucas's journey.
Can I talk about Lucas's journey? Lucas was angry, very, very angry. And I was his target. And he doesn't remember much of it, which is good. He read the chapters. I had him read the chapters. And he called me one day and he said, I just read the chapters and I want you to know how much I love you. And I've always loved you as much as I love Dad. I said, okay, I've always loved you as much as I love Reet. I said, okay. He was very angry. And I was his target, and it was really, really hard. I had to have people help me along the way. I had to have people be with Lucas when I couldn't be with him. And so that helped. He was in counseling for a couple of years, and he used to call the counselor at Children's Mercy the suicide doctor, because every time he went there, they had to ask him if he was going to harm himself. So that made it even more difficult that they brought up suicide right when he walked in the door. But that was their protocol because they wanted to check on him. He was just in a dark space. So I will tell you that dark spaces can last a long time, and you need to have good people around, watching and helping and being part of the circle. Because there were many times when I was not the right person to be with him. Here's the other thing is I was creating Faith Always Wins, and I was creating 7 days, and I was busy, and this was helping me heal, and it was hurting Lucas. He didn't want to hear about Reet. He didn't want to hear about Faith Always Wins. He did come to things, and he, his anger always happened at home when I was with him, but he was good out in public. But he was so depressed. He had survivor's guilt. Mm-hmm. He had survivor's guilt. And so his survivor's guilt comes back in March when it's his birthday. And we didn't understand that the first year, and we still didn't understand it the second year. Shame on us. And then the third year, we were really ready for it. He did tell someone that he wanted to take his own life, and luckily she told a counselor, and then they called us in. And so we were thrown into all of that. We changed our lives for him. We moved for him. Our lives were changed anyway. So it was just more. It was just another transition. But it was worth it to keep him alive. And so let's see. He went to school in Florida for finishing high school. And he loved being outdoors, so he wanted to golf. And he's actually good at golf. He's actually very good. Lynn and I don't golf. We don't know how he knows how to golf, but he's good. So he's a good golfer. And, that helped him. Research Medical Center helped him tremendously. That's a great system. And we let it happen. You put people around you that feel that give you, the right thing, and you know it's the right thing at the time. You know it's working. I remember Lynn will say this. He hated taking Lucas to the psychiatric hospital. Mm-hmm. Who wants to take their child at 13 to the psychiatric hospital? Lucas spent his birthday there. We had a birthday party for him, and then Lynn took him to Research Medical Center for the day. And Lynn just hated it. That was the worst part for Lynn, was that he had to take him. We had to take him, and Lynn would take him and I would pick him up. But Lynn would ask Lucas, when are you going to be better? When are we not going to be doing this? And Lucas said, Dad, I need to be there. So what I would say is, you really need to listen, but you got to let kids talk. You got to allow them to talk. You got to let them talk to you and then really listen. He is so aware now of his feelings. I totally believe him when he tells me how he's feeling, because he's so fully aware of how he's feeling. And I think he's aware of how other people are feeling too around him. But he just finished his freshman year at Arkansas. And I was really worried. I wanted him to go to maybe a junior college first. He didn't learn how to study until his senior year in high school. Mm-hmm. So he was behind. He was 2 years behind, and he had to catch up. The summer between his junior year and senior year, he took 80 hours of classes. He took 80 hours of comprehensive math and reading that he had missed because he was missing like a whole building block from middle school. Mm-hmm. And so he took that before his senior year, and he caught up. So he is a hard-working, nurturing young man who wants to live and knows that he deserves to live and that he deserves to have joy. He knows that now, which is really great.
This book is a call to courageous kindness, and
Yes.
I love that phrase. As we close out, would you talk about that call? What is your call to us in that courageous kindness idea?
Well, I think I spoke about courageous kindness without using the words when I was talking to Asher about, he asked the question about what do I say to students who are fearful? And I'm talking about courageous kindness when I say that we put Muslims and Christians in a room together. We're fearful about going outside of our box and going outside of our bubble. And for some, I'm sure COVID was welcome. I know some people who are like, oh, good, I don't have to be around people. I know people who said, I don't, have to be around people. So courageous kindness is when you feel that nudge in your heart, or if it's in your head, and it says to you, call Aunt Betty, or call Mary, or go say hi to that person who's sitting there and you don't know why they're alone. Why are they alone at lunch, or why are they alone at dinner? Or when you feel that and you feel embarrassment at the same time, just walk through that embarrassment and go ahead and do it, and that's courageous kindness. And I think that if we had more courageous kindness, we would have less hurt people. Mm-hmm. People get hurt, and then it's the whole point of getting over it, is that we need people to help us get through it. But I'm going to go back to, if someone's offering you help, say yes. If someone says, what can I do, which is sometimes hard to answer, you just might say, give me your number, and as soon as I know what you can do, I'm going to call you. But I would say, don't ask, what can I do? Say what you're going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring you lunch. I'm going to call you next Tuesday and make sure that you're okay. I'm going to do whatever. And then be on the receiving end and say yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's courageous kindness.
Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your courage, your leadership in the community, and thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
Tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.